Teachers of Reddit, what are your stories of, oh god, this child is a sociopath? Story 1. I have a million stories of students who say borderline sociopathic stuff. But the worst thing I've ever heard to date was I can't be trusted with knives. My mommy hides all knives in the house from me because I've tried to stab everything and everyone. I know if I stab an animal or a person too much they might die. This would mean I'd go to jail, and I don't think I could make it in jail, so I want to find a dead body and stab it over and over again. This way I know I won't get in too much trouble because the person was already dead. Story 2. Had a high school freshman who was a very boisterous kid, and youthful for his age. One day he was being disruptive and acting up, so I asked him to step out of the room with me while my co-teacher continued the lesson. I calmly explained to him why I had taken him out, why his behavior was disruptive, and asked him to be more mindful in the future. He seemed attentive to me, and to understand where I was coming from. Then, just as I was about to go back in with him, he says to me, "Okay, I'm gonna start crying so everyone thinks you yelled at me." I immediately put the brakes on. I asked him why he wanted to do that, why he felt it was okay to lie like that, and why he wanted to make me seem like a bad person when I had been very polite and thought we had had a good interaction. He didn't have any good answers with me, but we had already spent enough time out of class. I got him to agree to go in quietly and we went on with the lesson. Needless to say, it was a sign of things to come. He turned out to be a gossiping, backstabbing little social monster. The more mature kids learned to keep their distance from him, and he cultivated friendships with other kids who enjoyed his acting out, and emulated it. We finished out the year on reasonable terms, but as he went on to other teachers with different classroom styles, his behavior worsened and derailed many classes. Story 3. A 5-year-old kindergarten student started crying. He didn't want to go in the classroom. His mother told him he had to go anyways. The kid stopped crying, took off his belt, and started whipping his mother. As a teacher, it was the first time I was completely speechless. Story 4. This one happened just the other day, and obviously, I'm going to be anonymous about it to protect the child's identity. Let's call her Abby. So I'm driving a minibus of students home from a basketball practice when suddenly Abby starts screaming, "Did that have peanuts in it? I'm allergic to peanuts." She begins hyperventilating and crying and actually makes me pull over so she can get off the bus and throw up. We're about 15 minutes from the school and I'm literally having a panic attack. So I call the principal and ask what should I do. Do we have an AP pen on hand at the school ECT? She seems confused and puts Abby's grandmother on, who tells me she wasn't aware her granddaughter, who is claiming she can barely breathe, had any allergies. When we got back to the school I was about ready to faint and the principal brings out her registration paperwork to show me no listed allergies. She isn't allergic to anything. It was all an act. The hyperventilating, the crying, even the throwing up, was all for attention. Edit spelling. Story 5. First grader threatened to cut my head off with a pair of scissors, because I told her she couldn't put a mutilated dead body on her banner. Edit for the people saying in the comments that that kind of talk is normal for a first grader. By threatening to cut my head off with a pair of scissors, I mean she came at me with a pair of scissors while saying in a completely serious voice that she was going to cut my head off with a pair of scissors she was brandishing. Edit. This was over a decade before GOT came out. Story 6. So I am not entirely sure if this is sociopath or psychopath, but I had a child that was creepily into my pregnancy for the first 7 months. He wanted to name her, talk to my belly, etc. Then one day it clicked that I would leave and he got really close to me and whispered, "When you come out, I'm going to kill you with a hammer, I hate you." I was shocked, so I took him with me to the office. The LSSB asked why he said that. He replied that, "It will take her away. I wanted to die so she stays here." He was on a lot of medication for his incredibly violent tendencies. He had tried to kill his sister before by pushing her in front of a bus. His mother kept him locked in his room at night because she had found him standing over her with a knife. Edit. The child was a male, 10 years old. His mother agreed to have him committed after he attempted to kill a police support dog using a pair of scissors. MHMR and CPS were both involved. I haven't seen or heard from the family since I left the district. Story 7. Had a 6-year-old the size of a 9-year-old pin a 4-year-old to a wall, and at least looked like he was trying to feel her up. I walked up behind him and shouted, "What the do you think you are doing?" And he immediately backed off and started stuttering, trying to explain himself. He would say some up too. One time he walked up to me, a 6-foot-tall bearded man, and said basically, "Hey mama, let me on them titties." Hated that kid. If you told him to do anything, he would intentionally do something to go against what he was told. His parents spoiled him rotten, and let him do whatever he wanted. He got away with anything, because a former teacher had inadvertently injured him, and his family, who are filthy rich, threatened to sue the dog's head out of the school. He basically had immunity from discipline at school, and parents that let him do whatever he wanted. He hated me, because I wouldn't put up with his. I never hurt him, but I would put him in a hold so that he couldn't move fairly often, because he would constantly sucker punch other, smaller kids, for just about any reason at all, even if he just wanted the toy they were holding. Kid was a little sociopath, with parents that were rich enough that they enabled the behavior. Edit. A punctuation error. Story 8. His sister annoyed him so he killed her kitten in front of her. Complete and utter lack of remorse. Just didn't see animals as any different from toys. Violence towards animals during childhood is very common in serial killers. Story 9. I worked with a student who would fit this description. The stories of the things he did are extensive. One example is that he got up from his seat to throw something away. On his way back, he walked up behind a student who was distracted working on his assignment. Out of the blue, he pushed the working student's head forward and into the desk. He gave him a nose. There had been no previous altercation or source of friction between the two. His parents were divorced and his mother was too afraid of him to have him during the days she had custody. His father would move him frequently from school to school, once his behavior got so bad that the school started the process to get him into psychiatric care. Story 10. I taught a 15-year-old boy who was really creepy. He submitted a creative writing story that was rape fiction in which he graphically described how a white, blonde woman was being raped to corrupt the purity she feigns, which was quite scary as a white, blonde woman to read. When confronted by a vice principal, he started ranting about how he hated all the girls in the class because they were all, even though none listed had ever had an interaction with him, positive or negative. He then wrote me an apology letter where heaps of the lines were aggressively crossed out with drawn next to them. At last confrontation by a vice principal, he got really aggressive, walked out and punched the school fence several times. Unfortunately, he wasn't expelled. Story 11. I had a student while I was doing my student teaching 8th grade. He was constantly in trouble, but during the times he was in class, he just stared off with the most vacant look in his eyes. It truly scared me. It was downright creepy. One day he was up at the whiteboard writing some stuff. I think it was correcting sentences with a bunch of other kids who were doing the same thing. I wasn't watching the kids at the board, and all of a sudden I hear this blood-curdling scream and look over. He had brought a hypodermic needle and had stabbed the girl next to him in the leg. He had been holding it in his hand the entire time, just waiting for the opportunity to stick someone. It was of course terrible, but the girl turned out okay. The worst part, besides that, was how he laughed when security came to get him. Ugh, I'm shuddering now just thinking about it. Story 12. Not a teacher, but at my kid's daycare there was a bona fide sociopath in the making. This kid would inflict harm on others with a genuine smile on his face like he was playing, but he was secretly enjoying it. Hitting, biting, punching, kicking, breaking toys, destroying artwork. But very secretive and carefully planned when teachers or parents weren't looking. He was really intelligent and well-spoken for his age as well. Yeah, he was asked to leave after a few years and pretty much every parent there was relieved. Story 13. I taught a 4-year-old boy who actually scared me because I fear what his future will be. I can see him ended up doing some awful things to people. He would try and kiss and hug girls, and when they didn't want to, he'd hold them tightly and try to anyway, even if they loudly protested. I explained that there is no kissing in school, and if someone doesn't want a hug, they absolutely do not have to. I also said that some people don't like hugging. He said, well, I want her to, so she will. He just couldn't understand boundaries of any kind. This is just one tiny example of the things he did. I did refer him as I believe he has autism and he's undergoing assessment now and awaiting a diagnosis, but I worry there's something else there with him. He would also watch other children to see how he should act. For example, a child might be sad and another child comforts them. He would copy this behavior but totally exaggerate it. Like completely over the top and use it as an excuse to touch others. Mainly girls. He never showed any emotion other than anger and jealousy. He had a very scary look in his eyes and I've never met another child like him. Story 14. Anthony was 6. He had violent tendencies towards animals and other children. Severe headaches and a teddy bear containing the ashes of his dead sister. Story 15. Not a teacher, but I only remember the story because I had witnessed the fallout. In 11th grade, there was a girl, let's call her Carol, who was crazy about the cartoon Sonic the Hedgehog, to the point where a teacher threatened to fail her on a writing assignment if she turned in yet another Sonic fanfiction. Instead of actually doing work properly, she handed in an angry letter to the teacher as her assignment. Can't remember what the specifics of that letter were, but I do remember it was such that she got suspended for the remainder of the year. When she came back in grade 12, she had to apologize to everyone in her homeroom for her actions the previous year. It's in this apology that she tells us she had a brain tumor the size of Quebec. The kid from Quebec, naturally, yells at her for comparing Quebec to a brain tumor. Edit. Carol did a lot of other stuff besides the angry letter that year. She mentioned in her apology that she got a girl in trouble for vandalism so Carol could get the lead role in a school play. She dressed up as a Grim Reaper for some old person's funeral, and accused my friend, whom she never had any prior connection to, of tricking her into thinking the funeral was a Halloween party since this happened in May. The excuse was made of toothpicks. She got a 0 on a term project for math because she accidentally submitted a poorly written and creepy Sonic fanfiction instead of her assignment. She threw a temper tantrum to get the teacher to change the due date. Nothing came of it, and that's just the stuff she admitted to. Story 16. Not a teacher, but I was in his class when it happened. This was in 7th grade, I think. The teacher asked everybody to turn in their homework, and he asked for an extension because he was absolutely swamped for the last week. The teacher said no, and instead of just being okay with it, this kid picked up a chair and yeeted it across the classroom at the teacher. It hit her on the forehead and she had to get stitches. Kid was expelled. Story 17. Had a kid that was as basically Charles Manson. Has been aggressive before, stabbing kindergartners with scissors, hitting, biting, scratching. 1st grade began new behaviors. He would convince other kids to eat crayons, or to go tell other kids to say hurtful things to others. This was also the year he became more controlling over girls. He would invite them to play, then if they didn't do what he said he would get the group to push the girl out. The result was the girls really wanted his attention. When the girls realized it wasn't worth it and began abandoning him, he became aggressive again. This year 2nd grade he has begun trying to find like-minded kids and create a gang of bullies. Of course the staff are trying our best to curtail the behaviors, but the parents are very litigious. Multiple school psychologists and social workers have recommended individual therapy and social minutes, but the parents insisted it wasn't needed. They said that we were lying about the behaviors and wanted their own social services person to come in for observation. So obviously the student was on his best behavior. He is not stupid by any means. He knew what was up. The parents then used those findings to stonewall us for 6 more months. I do not believe any child beyond saving. But there are kids that really cannot be saved by public schools. This kid needs more social psych minutes, smaller classes, and more adult attention. We just don't have the money to provide that, especially when parents want to fight us every step tooth and nail. Story 18 met this kid when he was 2.5, and he was already messed up, super manipulative. He would chase the other kids, trying to hit or kick them. He crafted pretty convincing lies to get other kids in trouble, or blame them for things he did. He did it so well that it often was impossible to know it was a lie, other than that you knew it was him because it was always him. At nap time he would get off the cots and try to body slam all the kids trying to sleep. If you sat with him he would try to kick you in the face. If you tried to control him by restraining him or something like that, he'd scream that you were hurting him, and my director would come in and threaten to write us up if we touched him again. Nap time was terrible. At 3 he continued the above behaviors but started adding in creepy threats. He told my co-teacher he was going to get a gun online, and the postman was going to bring it to his house, and he would hide it in his backpack and bring it to school and shoot her in the head when she wasn't looking. He told another teacher he was going to bring a hammer and hit her until her head looked like applesauce. At 4 he was still doing all the above creepy but also was now big enough to throw chairs across the room, and had discovered gouging people's skin off with his fingernails and biting. He was not allowed to have anything even remotely sharp ever. We pretty much had to be constantly watching him. Despite having 19 other kids with 2 teachers, the ratio at 4 and up was 10 kids per teacher. During all of the above behaviors he would intersperse periods of being very sweet. As a teacher who wants the best for kids and believes they all deserve love and a place to feel safe, you'd think finally he's opening up to me, we can work with this, we can help him, even selfishly, in the teacher who finally got to him, but that was only new teachers, and we all fell for it at least once. Inevitably it turned out he was using it to get away with things, and when you take another kid's side on something where he was clearly in the wrong, head say, but I thought you liked me now, I thought you liked me, you hate me don't you, nobody loves me, while crying. If you made it clear you didn't buy that, he'd pretty much just scream at you and then turn back into the terror he was. It was just an emotional roller coaster with this kid, honestly, always holding out hope eventually that little phase of being nice would be the real deal, the time you'd really reached him. By 5 he still wasn't potty trained, he refused mostly, but when we pushed the matter his grandma got mad and told us never to put him in underwear. One day he showed up with stitches on his face. His grandma said he'd been bitten in the face by their dog and she was going to have it put down. We all immediately wondered what he'd done to the dog. For what it's worth, I convinced her to rehome the dog, and unless she was a manipulative lying little like her grandson, I like to believe she was telling the truth. We had real scissors in the pre-K room, and licensing says that all art materials had to be available at all times. This includes paint and chalk, which was a headache to manage all by itself. We had to watch him because he often tried to stab people. The director wouldn't listen to reason in regards to putting them up because of him. We were just supposed to do a better job controlling the classroom. He also had begun doing weird things. He would drag smaller kids under the slide or under a table where we'd be less likely to see and try to rip their pants down and hump them. He tried to grab the little girl's crotches. He started talking about genitals and asking questions. His grandma insisted we were teaching him this behavior and refused to answer any questions that intimated we thought it was probable that he was being abused. She'd scream about us, accusing his granddaddy, who she claimed was the only person home with him when she wasn't there, and how could we do something like that, and we were all perverts. I don't even remember all of it. We had all called CPS multiple times about this kid, and had never seen any follow-through. I had been refusing to work in the room with him anymore because I often had bruises and scratch marks and nothing was being done to support us. We were just supposed to redirect him. If we couldn't control him without saying no or using timeout or restraining him in any way we got in trouble, we were only supposed to redirect. I give him special treats, thereby further encouraging the behavior and making the other kids feel they had to replicate such behavior if they also wanted special toys, activities, food, whatever. My director was a complete asshat. However, when he was about 5.5 we had gotten a new director who immediately decided he was a danger to the other kids and we couldn't control him with any tools we were authorized to use. She suggested he get some outside help and perhaps reduce his time with us until his behavior improved. His grandma withdrew him instead, screaming the whole time about how we always hated her and her baby and now he wasn't going to have anyone to watch him and he was going to get worse because we abandoned him, etc., etc. I really hope that little boy got help. He was a danger from before most kids were forming full sentences, and continued getting worse. I hope he got removed from the toxic environment he was in and got all the help he could get. However, I will not be surprised to see his name in the newspaper someday soon connected to a violent crime or two. He would be 11 or 12 by now. Story 19. Two twin 8th grade boys, literal lunatics, threw their dog across their living room and it landed on the edge of the table. They said it was dead but still moving and they buried it. Dude, they buried a live dog. This was confirmed by neighbors and they're now in the appropriate facilities, messed up times a million. Story 20. I have seen students display all sorts of extreme behavior over the past 20 years, teaching teenagers in challenging schools. The one kid that I was convinced was a psychopath, just quietly refused to do anything he didn't want to do. I never saw him angry, and yet I did see him hit people and say awful things to them. He was always eerily calm. He was tiny and very cute, but he used to manipulate people and watch chaos unfold with these huge unblinking puppy dog eyes. It was like he was carrying out an experiment. Anyway, that was when he was about 14. He's 19 now and serving a life sentence for a horrific gang murder. Story 21. I have an ex who is a preschool teacher and he affectionately calls his students my little sociopaths, not to their faces or parents, because that age is just, empathy is a learned skill, let's put it that way. I had honestly never thought about it, but he taught me that things like hitting is bad because it hurts people, and hurting people is not a good thing is something that kids have to be taught. Edit for an attempt at clarity that while kids have a huge range of emotions that we sometimes forget about because they can't use their words for them the way adults do, the behaviors one uses to demonstrate concepts like caring for others are a skill of sorts to be demonstrated, taught, and practiced, and it's much harder to get them to understand it when they're older than like 4 or 5. I think he said 3 is really when they start to get it, but often parents are still treating 3-year-olds like babies. My mom was a teacher for several decades and she taught some real winners too. There's a kid a few years younger than me that she had and she never explicitly said anything bad about him because he was the son of one of her friends and lives in their neighborhood, but that kid was straight from a horror movie. He's adopted and one of the first things he did after his parents brought him home was to shut the family dog in the refrigerator. One time he sneaked up to my parents' house in the middle of the night. We live in the middle of nowhere, so this is terrifying in and of itself, and tried to break into our house. My parents usually left the doors unlocked at night, and I would go around after they went to bed and lock them. When that didn't work, he cut the electrical wiring to our outside lights, so it was pitch black outside and we couldn't see anything, and then slashed the tires on my car and tried to break the windows. He used to just beat the out of other kids, especially younger ones, whenever the mood struck him. That is like 30 now and he's still a total piece of, like, he still lives with his mom and he's gotten her house swatted at least 5 times because he deliberately goes online into spaces where that's a thing and antagonizes people, then takes off to leave her to deal with the fallout. I'm hoping to be an adoptive parent myself one day, and sometimes I have nightmares about this kid because as far as I know, his parents really did try super hard to help but it just never worked. Story 22. Elementary school. Rich preppy white boy 11 drew a picture of only black boy 10 inches class. It showed a dead decapitated body with lots and lots of blood and a chainsaw. He then calmly explained to me how he was planning to murder and cut up the other boy and how he doesn't deserve to have presents for Christmas as he's black and Santa doesn't like black kids. Had to contact the headmaster and parents. Joke's on him, the headmaster was a very cool black lady. Story 23. Not a teacher, but my wife is. When she was about 8 months pregnant she had a kid try to kick her stomach, try to stab her with scissors, and threaten to kill her regularly. She's a kindergarten teacher. Story 24. For what it's worth, I'm actually a teacher, but I was babysitting. In this case I was asked to babysit a 9-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy a few weekends ago. ID never met the kids, but I figured the 9-year-old and I will just hang out with a mutual understanding that she doesn't need me there, and the 3-year-old might need some redirection and to just be kept occupied. Boy was I wrong. The 9-year-old was a straight-up manipulative bully. She gave the boy jobs to do when playing Play-Doh and then tore him up telling him how bad he was at every job she gave him. She chased him around the house with a sharpened pencil. She roughhoused with him until he got hurt and ran upstairs crying. And then she chased after him laughing going, "I'm really sorry." She stole the TV remote out of my hand and hid it when I tried to find a movie to put on. She tried to tell me that his bedtime wasn't actually when the kid's mom told me it was and got him up to play trucks. Then when I was finally getting him to go to sleep with a story, she came in the room and told me that it was way past his bedtime and he's not allowed any more books. ID never met a child so starved for control, but I really question where this is coming from because 1, I gave her nothing to push back against. If she was being controlling because I was treating her like a child, I would have understood. But I wasn't, and 2, it was clear her parents weren't extremely strict with her on a normal basis. Anyway, my first clue should have been when the parents offered me a higher pay per hour than I asked for. Even with the chance to make 100 in one night, I'm never going back. Story 25. I'm a gymnastics coach. This was several years ago, but we were running summer camps that were open to the public. One week I had a 6-year-old boy who threatened to slit my throat because I asked him to wait his turn to do some skill. Story 26. Principal took me outside the class for a while to talk about something. The minute I came back everyone was silent and one kid was standing at the board, marker in one hand and razor blades in the other, one jammed into the marker cap. No idea why he would do that apart from holy, he wants to see me cut my hand off. Suspended IRC yearly project for 10-11th grade. The kids had to assign themselves into groups of 4, they all ended up in their groups apart from one kid who remained, the stereotypical loner kid at the back. I asked him if he wanted to join any group he saw or make a project of his own, and he just looked into my eyes and said, "I don't care, they'll all soon be dead anyway." I had to take him to the principal and he simply said I didn't mean it as a threat, I just relish in the fact that one day each and every one of them will be actually dead. Holy, I still remember this to this day, it's been like 7 years. Story 27. One of my students 11 years old pushed a huge Christmas tree over on an elderly man and another small child and laughed hysterically. His reasoning: it's already January 3rd. Christmas is over. Story 28. Not a teacher, sorry, but when I was younger, maybe 8, I remember going to some family gathering way out in the country. There were tons of distant relatives. Their great-grandparents had 11 kids, and therefore lots of cousins I didn't know. One girl, probably 4 or 5, was scary. All of us kids would try to play with her and she would just act strange. But one thing I really remember was someone was showing us some baby chicks, letting us hold them and pet them. My mother had just explained to us, be very gentle, they're babies, etc., etc. Well, this little girl is holding a baby chick on her palm, looks right into my mom's eyes and just squeezes this chick until its eyes bulge. They stopped her, and to my knowledge the chick was fine, but he'll never forget the look in her eyes. Immediately after this happened, her dad scooped her up in his arms, and she just looked back at all of us, smiling maniacally. Story 29. When I taught at the university, a student in the class was arrested, and at least if other students are to be believed, it was because he tried or at least planned to kill all his roommates. I never would have guessed that looking at him. Story 37-year-old knew that if the little kids put toys in their mouths, would wash and sanitize them diligently. When this kid got mad, he'd go over to the Lego bin and slowly spit one fat loogie into it before mixing up all the pieces. He'd then spend the rest of the day reveling in the knowledge that some poor teacher would have to wash and dry 5,000 pieces of Lego. Story 31 had a student who wasn't the best behaved, but hadn't caused a ton of problems yet. A rumor started going around school that he had killed the neighbor's dog. I don't remember why, but obviously concerning. Another student said to him, "Hey, they say you killed your neighbor's dog. Did you really do that?" or something to that effect. And this kid immediately said it didn't die, nothing else, no emotion or explanation. Story 32. I got a new student in 5th grade who had already been diagnosed with so many things because you can't be a psychopath sociopath till you're an adult for the most part. ODD. Her mom had schizophrenia, a whole long list of issues. Def not gonna get that diagnosis in 5th grade, but the stepmom came to the school to warn us about her. Y'all, she was my best student. She stole anything that wasn't nailed down. But my class was so crazy we already had like 3 EBD diagnoses and the admin just threw the rest of the bad kids in for funsies that I think she felt like she was with her people. Oh, she got great grades. She never made a peep. Story 33. A 1st grader, Madison, made-up name is made up, pushed a friend off of a high stool in the art room because the other girl wouldn't share her crayon. Immediately give up the crayon even though she was in the middle of using it. The friend wasn't badly hurt, but said she didn't want to sit with Madison anymore, so I said okay and moved her. Madison burst into tears and told me that I had to force the other girl to sit with her, that it wasn't fair that I told the other girl that she didn't have to share, that it wasn't fair that I told the other girl that she didn't have to be friends with Madison if Madison was hurting her and making her feel bad, and how unfair it was that the other girl had fallen off the stool just to make Madison look bad. I just can't even with Madison. Literally nothing is ever her fault. If she steals something, it's the other student's fault for giving it to her then lying about doing so. I've seen kids actually doubt themselves about whether they've given Madison their things, even though I watched her steal it. This girl is 6 and has gaslighting down to a science. Story 34. Not me, but my friend teacher's 4th grade, and she had one of the kids write a story in great detail on how they would murder their family and get away with it. Edit. She gave an assignment where the kids got to write whatever story they wanted. Story 35. Story from a friend. As the new teacher, he got stuck doing after-school detention a lot his first year as a high school teacher. He didn't mind because he always stays late anyway with paperwork. Now at some point he had only one student for detention, and he says she is the worst human being he's ever met. She told him that he will start marking her as having attended the detention and all future detentions, or she's going to say that he assaulted her. Luckily for him there's both cameras and microphones in the classrooms, so that never happened and he did report it to the principal. She was later expelled for bringing a knife to school and cutting another girl's ponytail off in the bathroom. Story 36. Not a child, but an 18 to 19 years old college student. I was the TA for a class that viewed a lot of movies about the Holocaust and World War II. This kid would crack up at random scenes of death, starvation, and typhus victims. Story 37. I go to an international school that had lots of different people in it, kind of irrelevant to the story. Anyways, back in primary school there was this child, let's call him Roman. He was abusive to teachers and other students. In 1st grade he attacked the teacher and had the whole class in one half of the room whilst everyone watched in horror as he rained on the teacher's desk. He even pissed on it. A couple of years later in 3rd grade he decides he wants to be again. So he picks up a pencil and proceeded to stab 3 students around him and run to the teacher and stab him twice in the waist. Soon after he was expelled. Still wonder where that guy is. Edit. I am a student, same age and year as Roman. Story 38. I was providing in-class support for a 6-year-old student who had very concerning behavior. Let's call her Jamie. I was lucky in that Jamie liked me. This did not stop her from kicking, scratching, and biting me whenever I would attempt to stop her. Jamie's teacher and I were working together to collect data for the school's diagnostician, but one thing we could never even begin to understand is what was triggering her negative behaviors. When she wanted to be, she was a very sweet kid. I knew that she could make good grades if she cooperated and worked on her assignments. But randomly throughout the day she would go on a literal rampage in the classroom, throwing things, flipping tables, attacking students, shouting and cursing. Once she even darted out of the classroom. out the side door of the school, and towards the main road. She would play with her friends at recess, and then an hour later I'd have to pull her off of those same kids while she swung her legs and fists at them. I remember one day I had taken her out of the classroom until she calmed down. I said, "Jamie, I just want to help you. I want you to feel better so you can go play with your friends. I'm not mad at you, I just want to help. What would make you feel better?" And she stared at me with a blank expression. Story 39. My first year teaching. I taught 3 grades in remote Northern Ontario, had a boy in grade 7 age appropriate, not level hump my leg, by far my weirdest teaching story, but I've got lots that I'm very certain folks think are enhanced. There is no need to enhance teaching stories. The real versions are crazy enough. We often say to each other, "Yeah, can't make this up," when an incident occurs.